Over the last 5 years in our sport, it's tough to argue that any disc has been more popular than the overstable approach disc. These specialty discs fitting somewhere in between the putter and mid-range have taken over the game, and you'll find multiple in almost any player's bag. There are numerous things that have attributed to this rise in popularity, but one of them is certainly the emergence of the forehand shot in the sport of disc golf, and these are a perfect fit considering their very flat profile. Since there are so many of this type of disc available to the consumer and many of them look and fly so similar, I've made this video to help you decide which one is best for you. If you haven't checked out the first video I did in this series, make sure to check it out. I did throwing putters in that one, but now we're focusing all on the approach disc. Now, my goal here is to help you find a disc that'll help your disc golf game. But if you're playing disc golf purely for fun and a certain disc allows you to accomplish that goal, then just throw that disc and don't worry too much about this video. For this video, I've selected 6 approach discs that I think are popular choices and some that I would definitely consider. Now, just like when I selected the putter molds in the previous video in this series, there are so many more molds than just 6 to choose from. However, especially with the approach category, that can be very overwhelming. So I felt that these 6 would give a good range to choose from, and this will help simplify it a little bit. Before I get any further into the video, I want to leave a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button down below and like button as well. It really helps me out. There's a lot of you that aren't subscribed yet, and pretty soon I'll hit my 20,000 subscriber mark, and I'm going to be doing a giveaway that only subscribers will be able to win. Thanks again for all your support, and make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you have not yet. Now, before I introduce these molds I've selected, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my process for this video. The approach disc category is kind of tricky because these discs are very similar in nature. Unlike putters, mid-ranges, and especially drivers, the approach category doesn't necessarily take up a huge range of different flights. Typically, they have a few common characteristics that kind of make them what they are. You're typically looking at a disc that is lower in profile, flat on top, and tends to be a little more overstable in nature. Now, not all the discs are like this, but many of them are. So when I'm sorting these discs, I'm going to be using a simple level system. I'll be breaking them down into 3 levels of stability: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 being the least stable and level 3 being the most overstable. Now, this isn't as simple as, oh, well, if you're an advanced player, you should throw the harder levels, versus if you're a beginner, you should throw a level 1 disc. Each level of stability applies to each level of player, whether beginner, intermediate, or advanced, in a different way. And I'll also be explaining that into the video. So hopefully at the end of the video, you'll be able to take what you know about yourself as a player and compare it to the data I've provided and find a disc that works for you. Now, I'm going to introduce the molds first, then I'm going to go out to the course, throw these discs around, show you what they fly like, also remind myself of how they fly before I hop back here into the lab and do a full breakdown on each disc. Now, the first disc I've got here is the Slammer from Dynamic Disc. Not a disc that is as popular as some of the others here, but it's been in my bag for a long time and I absolutely love it. The next disc I have here is a Zone OS from Discraft. This one I feel will stand out from the others, but I think it's important to have in here because people are curious about it and you should really know what it does. Next, we have the Toro from Innova. A pretty new disc to the market, but certainly a up-and-comer in this category of plastic. Then we have the Peppermint from Clash Disc, kind of a sequel to the original Mint from Clash. This is a little bit more overstable and quite an exciting disc. Then we've got a real classic here, the Harp from Westside Disc, one that I've thrown a bit in my career, but this is certainly a popular one and has been for some time. And then last but not least, of course, we had to have a Zone from Discraft, just the regular Zone. This is a very beloved disc and it will certainly stack up among the others as a very versatile and useful disc. All right, now let's hop out to the course, throw these discs, and then we'll meet back here in the lab to break them down.
All right, we're starting off with the Slammer here. The first hole at Timbrook, pretty straight away. As you can see, the Slammer has a nice fade at the end, but does start out pretty straight. Then I went into the Zone OS. This disc, very clearly going to be a standout amongst the others, as you will soon find out. Third in the order, I chose the Toro from Innova. This one flying out starting straight, but then tugging significantly left at the end. That disc does have some bite. Moving on to the Peppermint. Don't worry if these discs all seem super similar to you right away. I played quite a few holes so that I would be able to explain the small nuances between them, because it can be intimidating when you look at all these discs and they seem to all just go straight and then go left at the end. There's the Harp, and then finally here is the Zone. One of the straighter discs of the bunch, but still having that patented fade at the end. I really wouldn't be talking about any of these discs if they didn't at least fade at the end. So the next hole here is downhill and a forehand hyzer. All the discs should act relatively similar, dumping right here, but, well, other than that Zone OS. But you'll notice that some of them do glide a little bit further forward before pushing down to the ground. Some of them find that hyzer angle a little easier. Here we have the Toro. As you can see, I kind of yanked this, but that disc has plenty of time to get back to the right, nice and overstable. I really found that disc to be super dependable. Going with the Peppermint here, this one I let go of a little bit high, and that disc is pretty unforgiving. Very, very overstable. More overstable than I remembered from throwing it previously. The Harp here, the headwind kicked up a little bit more than it was previously. Flipped up, but then held nicely, and actually gave the basket a little bit of a run there. That disc flew quite nice, and then finishing off with the ESP Zone again. This one didn't flip up as much as the Harp did. I thought it would, but yeah, a little bit straighter, and then a nice finish at the end. Now, on this hole, as you can see, I go for a force over line. So some discs, like the Slammer, will hold that force over a little bit longer. The Zone OS obviously will not. It will quickly fall out of that and then bite left at the end. The Toro here you'll see next. This one's another stable disc where you try to force it over, it wants to hold, but then falls left at the end quite significantly. Whereas the Peppermint, well, yeah, the Peppermint actually does a very similar thing. You can kind of just see the point in that arc where those more overstable discs decide to fight out compared to something like the Harp here, where it wants to almost fall to flat. That's a huge difference when it comes to overstable discs and really overstable discs. Is the straighter ones, like this Zone, will just kind of fall to flat, whereas the more overstable ones that you saw earlier will really bite left. Now, here we have just a pretty standard short flat shot. I'm trying to let the disc come out as flat as I can. Zone OS is pretty tough to do that with, and just fall to the basket. As you can see, a lot of these discs at this distance, when you're not throwing super far, will perform pretty similar. You'll have discs, even like the Peppermint, being quite overstable. It definitely dies hard at the end. That one almost kicked in, but they will fly straight for a little bit, especially when they're not thrown super hard and you're just kind of keeping the disc flat and neutral. Finally, here's the Zone, and yeah, no crazy standouts. Only really the Peppermint and Zone OS flew a ton different. On this hole here, I was trying to cut it loose and just see how far I could get these discs to fly. I go with the Slammer first. That disc is just really hard to throw far. None of these discs were really able to make it down to that basket, but I was trying to just get as much distance as I can. You can see that Zone OS. Man, you can just crank into that thing, and it will not let you win. The Toro here, I actually got quite a bit of distance out of the Toro. I flexed it and it fought out, but it pushes as it fights, and certain discs are like that. Even the Peppermint here is kind of like that, where it really fights out quick, but it continues to push as it goes to the left. It doesn't just die and fall. It glides a little bit. Moving on to the Harp, this is one that definitely flies straighter than a lot of the others. You can see that disc really just kind of sat down at the end. The Zone here is pretty similar. I really cranked over on that and definitely doesn't have as much bite as some of those other discs. Moving on here, this is just kind of a stock hyzer throw. Slammer came out a little bit low there, but we got another hyzer coming up on the next hole, so you'll see it there. Here's the Zone OS. You see the way that Zone OS, on a hyzer, it almost gets vertical up and down and just goes downwards. It's not like it goes super left. It almost just wants to get out of the sky. And then you see the Toro, an overstable disc that is less overstable, and this Peppermint here, they want to move left. There's almost this balance between super overstable and a disc just wanting to fall out of the sky, and a little bit less overstable but still stable enough that it wants to move left significantly. And sometimes that can be the benefit of using a disc like this Zone. You get a flippy disc on a little hyzer like that and give it height, it will just continue to pan left through its flight. And actually you can get more left that way than with a really overstable disc sometimes. Another stock hyzer here, you can see the Slammer. Slammer just has a really agreeable basic flight. There's that Zone OS again, getting almost straight up and down and not even really skipping because of how vertical it was. The Toro I had tugged, but once again, that disc really likes to move right to left when you give it some air underneath it. The Peppermint, similar, but bites a little more. It almost tries to get vertical like that Zone OS, just not quite as significant enough to where it skipped left a lot at the end there. Then having the Harp, I believe that was next. And then the Zone OS to finish out. A lot of these discs, like the Harp and the Zone OS and Slammer, that aren't quite as overstable, on hyzer, they look pretty typical. They're not going to do anything too crazy. So here we have a power forehand. This is where I was just leaning into them, seeing how they flew. Slammer, pretty normal. Zone OS, as you can see, I'm cranking over on that disc. It's just not going anywhere. The Toro here, actually got a little bit more pop out of it than I thought. It kind of moved its way up the flat a little bit before really pushing forward. I was impressed with that. The peppermint continuing to be one of the more overstable of this bunch. My forehand is not super powerful, but anytime you're throwing a forehand, you're putting a lot of torque on the disc. You can see the harp actually almost folded over there, popped up the flat before pushing. It was actually quite a nice flight, and the zone wanted to kind of pop up there too, even though I did release it a little early. So it's always good to know that a forehand needs to be able to handle a lot of torque. This is a shorter distance forehand. I threw a lot of forehands because it is obviously important. That one almost went in, hit the cage. It's such an important function of this disc to have the forehand shot. See, there's a shot that the Zone OS does do well, is you can just force it over and it just kind of dies on you near the basket, which can be useful. The Toro there doing a great job handling my wobbly forehand and falling towards the basket. Then going to the Peppermint. Peppermint, just a really, really overstable disc. It was tough for me to kind of grasp how right that disc was going to move. Then onto the harp here. Really nice flight on those short forehands. Really loved throwing the harp out there. And then finished up with the zone. And that wrapped up my testing. So let's hop back into the lab and I'll break it down.
Okay, we're back in the course now, so let's do a full breakdown on each disc to help you figure out which one is best for you. We're going to start here with the Slammer from Dynamic Disc. This disc is a favorite of mine. It's been in my bag for some time now, and there are a lot of reasons why I like it so much. One of the reasons I do enjoy this disc is because of the shape of it. I do like the thumb track on top. However, some people won't like that, so if the thumb track isn't your thing, then probably just steer away from this one. What you're going to get from the Slammer is a very nice, slow, reliable, consistent flight without being too overstable. I would actually put this disc in the level 1 category for stability. Newer players can use this as an overstable approach disc, whereas players with a stronger throw, especially a stronger forehand throw, will actually get more of a straighter flight before a nice little fade at the end. As this disc beats in, you'll find that it'll fly straighter and straighter, but still resist plenty of torque without turning over or getting inconsistent. I've had Slammers in my bag for well over a year, throwing them all the time, and they manage to stay trusty and predictable even after being worn in a baseline plastic like this. So I would certainly recommend the Slammer to any skill level, but especially if you're just getting your feet wet in this disc category, this is a great option. Okay, next we have the Zone OS here. I'm sure you saw from the throws, this one is much different than the others. The Zone OS is quite a special disc. This thing is so overstable, it is borderline useless in a lot of scenarios. However, what I will say about the Zone OS is that when you do need it, when you do need that very niche particular shot, such as a tight flex angle or insane winds, it does exactly what you need it to do. I've found carrying this disc as a utility disc in my bag is where you find the most use for it. So I would place this certainly easily in the level 3 category of stability for the approach disc. There's really maybe only a few others like it, none that I threw today. So that comes with a few warnings. If you're an advanced player, you can use this for flex shots and utility shots. Intermediate players, you might find some use of it, but if you're a beginner and you're really looking to improve your game, you might want to stay away from this one for now. It might be more trouble than it's worth. Moving on to the Toro. This is a very, very exciting disc. I hadn't thrown this a ton, but throwing it out there on the course, I really enjoyed it. It's got a nice reliable fade. I would put this in a level 2 category for stability, but even with that reliable fade and stability, I still found that I was able to push and get distance out of this disc and even work it a little bit before it flexed out. I think new players, beginners, will find this at the very top of their stability range, something that'll dump quite hard, but intermediate and advanced players will get a nice bit of push out of this before it fades on them, but they certainly can trust it. This is a great up-and-comer disc and might be my pick, honestly, from this bunch if I were just taking this test objectively. Okay, next we have the Peppermint here from Clash. This just surprised me a bit. I didn't realize quite how overstable it was. I would say this is upper level 2 of stability, getting close to that level 3, but really just can't compare to the Zone OS. So I would say beginners maybe have caution when considering this disc, but if you're in the intermediate or advanced level and you're looking for something really nice and overstable, but still useful in a lot of situations, the Peppermint is a great option. You're gonna find that this disc is low enough in profile that it will push and get some distance, but you can throw great S lines with this, get nice forehand flexes out of it. It is super, super reliable. It also has a very agreeable, low profile, flat top, and comfortable feel in the hand. the Peppermint is a great choice. Okay, next we have the Harp here from Westside. I hadn't thrown these in a while, so it was fun to kind of relearn it, but it is quite an interesting disc. Given the deeper profile compared to some of the rest of these, this might be a reason to choose it. If you like the feel of a deeper disc, this is certainly the deepest one of the bunch, other than the Zone OS, but that's on a whole different planet. I would actually put this in the level 1 of stability. I've thrown harps that are more stable than this, and keep in mind, plastic types can affect this. I am aware that not all of these discs can fly slightly different in different plastic types, but that would be quite an exhaustive video. I'm trying to give you just a general idea. And in my experience, there are only a few discs that fly almost completely different in different plastic types. But this harp isn't a premium plastic, which you would expect to be one of the more overstable variants of the disc, and it had a pretty pleasant and straight flight. I was able to get pretty comfortable lines with this, but once the disc does find hyzer, it does dump dependably, which makes this a great option. So I would put this in the upper level 1 of stability, but recommend it to any skill level. If you're looking for something that is workable, not super fast, but still dependable on hyzer, the harp is a great option. Okay, last but not least here, we have the ESP Zone here from Discraft. This disc rocks. I've had a Zone, ESP Zone to be precise, in and out of my bag over the last year, and I've thrown it a ton. What I love about the Zone is, number one, it's just such a comfortable and great feeling profile in the hand, very flat, a nice agreeable rim, not too shallow, not too deep. And this disc, especially in the ESP plastic, is super workable. You can get distance out of this disc, but you also know that you can trust it into some wind and when throwing it hard with hyzer. I would put this disc in the level 2 category, but probably on the lower side of that. Not quite as stable as that Toro that I was throwing, but this disc is still plenty reliable. If you have not tried a Zone yet, you definitely should give it a try. It's one that everybody should give a look sometime in their disc golf career. So there you have it. There are 6 options in that approach category that could work for your game. Hopefully some of that advice was helpful to you and you kind of narrowed down 1 or 2 that you'd like to try for yourself. I don't really think you could go wrong with any of these except maybe the Zone OS, but I'm sure there is one that is perfect for your game and hopefully you were able to find it. In all honesty, I hadn't really thrown the Toro yet from Innova, and I think this was my favorite from the bunch. I really enjoyed using this disc. It was super versatile. If you want to pick up any of these molds, you can go to foundationdisc.com. That is linked in the description. There's a great place to buy some plastic. And if you want to see more of these videos, let me know. Should we go to mid-ranges next? Do you want to see fairways, distance drivers? Should I continue doing this series in the future? I do love doing these kind of analytical breakdowns of discs. It's something I'm passionate about. I've been in this sport for over 10 years now, so I do have some knowledge when it relates to picking discs, and it's something that I am passionate about. Also, before we leave, one last thing I wanted to mention, I am interested in looking for logo and merchandise designers. Something I'm really passionate about is developing a brand around this channel, and unfortunately, I'm not the most talented at doing that when it comes to graphic design. I do have some ideas, but I'd love to have some creative people to come alongside me and help me out with that. So if that's something that you are skilled at, interested at, send me a mock-up or a few samples. My email is in the link in the description, and I'd love to check those out. Other than that, thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you next Monday with another upload.